Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Advocacy Prime, episode 10 here. We got, a collective total of I think about 17 podcasts here, and very excited about that. So I'm also very excited to be, Zooming with somebody who I've been following a lot on Twitter. And, he reached out to me and said, we got some of the same philosophies here. And I got Evan Whitehead. What's going on, Evan? How we doing?
Hey, how you doing, Michael? Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Oh, absolutely. Evan is the Director of Special Services over at Lindop School District 92 over here in Illinois. He's got his master's in education, and he oversees the ECE, the Early Childhood Education Department, and working well with the MTSS, multi-tiered system supports, and in charge of family engagement. And one of the big core things that we're going to be talking about today is his enthusiasm for SEL learning, social and emotional learning. Such a huge topic today. And I kind of want to jump into this because we were talking right before this. I saw you on this YouTube show, Online Education Leadership Forum, the OLEP, and OL, through the Global Citizen Foundation. And it was just remarkable. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved with that?
Sure. So one of my good friends and colleagues, Steve Sostek, who's with Inspire Citizens, and he's a co-founder of Inspire Citizens. He, the work that Inspire Citizens does in terms of global education is huge. And through him, he introduced me to the folks that were running the podcast, the program, and he knew that they were talking about SEL, and he connected me and said, "Hey, you should reach out to Evan. Passionate about SEL." And then, they wanted to really get a more global perspective, and it kind of went that way. And then they reached out to me, we talked a little bit, and then it came about.
It was so cool because we had speakers from India there, and I think India, one's from the UK as well.
Ireland, that's correct.
Or Ireland, over 100 publications and such.
Right.
And big caliber people, and
yes,
you killed it. And
thank you.
But it also brings me back to the thought of that there is so much going on in the world,
Yeah.
And that we are kind of in this bubble here, which you kind of did you have that perspective prior?
I think one of the reasons I wanted to do it because, one of my core foundations are the United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals, SDGs. And, one of those goals is quality education and also good health and well-being. And so that's kind of where I anchor a lot of my work, to that, because I know whatever I do, it's always bigger than me, right? It's bigger than Evan Whitehead. It's bigger than what I'm doing here in Illinois, or even what I'm doing, in the region, or, here in the United States. We're all interconnected, right? And truly, this is a time where I think as educators, we can see how our roles, responsibilities are parallel, right? And this current pandemic has also shown that our lives really aren't that different, right? As much as we try, some people may think, or we may feel, that we're different from people in other parts of the world. The reality is that, this pandemic has shown that regardless of race, gender, religion, language, everyone's affected by it in some way. And especially in the world of education, we're all going through the same process now, right? So even though, we may think of, oh, wow, what a great education system we have here in the States, or even our districts. And all of a sudden, COVID-19 shut everybody down, right? It didn't matter if you were a district with a lot of resources or if you didn't have a lot of resources. It literally put the brakes on everything and paused. And it was like, okay, we don't have any control over this anymore. And, everyone was now on that working from the same spot. So I think it created an opportunity for people to really start thinking about, okay, what's important in education right now, right? And for me, because, it's that social emotional component, because right now, this is something we've never seen. It's unprecedented, right? But it's also a disruption, which means when it's a disruption, that also can be traumatic for people, right? And oftentimes adults have those skill sets to bounce back and be able to be resilient about that. But for the children, it's a huge disruption. So now when you think about, okay, what's important for us? Well, one, some of the basic needs, right? We want to make sure our students are eating. We want to make sure they have food, right? So that's why you've seen all over the country the grab and go breakfast and lunch, right? First and foremost. We also want to make sure we can do a well-being check, right? Making sure our students are okay. How are they doing? Are they safe, right? Because the other part that we often forget is our students see school, for many of them, as a place that's safe, that's consistent, right? That can shelter them, even if it's on a temporary basis, where they may have to deal with some of the other challenges in their home environment or the community, their neighborhood. But now we just stop that. We just literally, right, pull the rug from up under them. And now we have to be mindful that, some students may be at risk because now they're in homes, or they're may be in a home, because it may not be their home, but maybe their parents, are they have to work, right? So therefore, because they're essential workers, they may not be at home. They may be at home in a home of someone else. So all these factors of consistency that we once knew, at least we thought we had some type of connection with, it's gone. So for me, I think about, okay, we need to make sure we're still connecting with students. We need to still make sure we're engaging them. We're still making sure that they know we're still here for them, right? And the smallest thing, like a Zoom call or Google Hangout, right? And it doesn't have to be long, but it's meaningful. So if we can do those type of things, that's what's important right now. The academics will come, right? Michael, the academics they're gonna come no matter what. But the academics, especially for the populations that you and I have dedicated our work to, right? We know that the academics are secondary, but if you build a rapport, right, and you have that relationship with those students, they'll do anything for you, and they'll also reach unbelievable heights and go beyond any expectations that anyone had for them and themselves. So, it's almost like getting back to basics, right? Because, the one thing that we know is that good teaching is good teaching, right? Doesn't matter if a student has an IEP, doesn't matter if they don't have an IEP, doesn't matter if they're an English learner, doesn't matter what their situation is. Good teaching can be applied to all student situations. And that's why, I feel that the SEL component is huge, because, what student can't benefit from social emotional learning, right? What student can't benefit from those competencies that can help them become a productive citizen, be able to work, in our society, be able to get along with folks. They all can.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, when we really do talk about that bottom of the pyramid that you're referring to, and that's that food, shelter, and again, that's just been slipped under. That's their foundation, and so now we're broken a bit. And I think there's just so many environmental factors that are happening here, right? Okay, isolation, but also now when we go out into out from isolation, you have two types of people. One who's going to say hi to you, and the other one just going to completely avoid you. And that's rightfully so. That's your choice. That's your you don't have to go out into the community in times of distress and pretend to be happy. But I think that the face mask, just alone. And when I think about teaching in a face mask one day, and just now, in that I miss that genuine nonverbal connection with somebody, and it's just cracking a smile in a reaction, it gets your chemicals going inside. Oh, they thought that was funny. And then you add the food into it, and the shelter, and for these kids, and they're just they're getting the same stimulus each day. which, isn't necessarily, it's not something they're used to, not something that anybody's used to. And and the parents are we're reacting with our children, and, and that's completely normal. And
right.
Because, well, what is normal at this point? So,
right.
I think that, and I want to see what you maybe think about this. Is just and then we'll kind of go in more to the education component, but for everybody, I think that if the state of Illinois and the country for the most part can follow restrictions to stay at home. I don't know the data on how many people have actually been following that, but I mean, everybody's aware of that behavior. If we're able to get a whole country to do that, then why can't we give them simple steps to practice mindfulness?
Right. Right. I think, in terms of mindfulness, right, that takes a lot of skill, right? It goes back to those competencies, social emotional learning, right? You have to be self-aware first and foremost, right? Then you need social awareness. And then, in order to do that, you also need self-management skills, so self-regulation. And the thing about mindfulness is that if you truly find a way to get centered, right? It's all about being present, right? And in the present and knowing everything, what's going on, and just being aware of it and not judging whatever it is, right? So, with that, it's almost thinking of any situation that comes to you, right? It's not necessarily good or bad. It just is, but you have to learn how to deal with it and work through it. Because it's very likely that same situation is going to come up again at some time or something similar, right? So if you never really deal with whatever that emotional response that you may, give because of a situation, right? And you never deal with it, that's going to be something that's going to be an obstacle in your way for the rest of your life. Because it's always going to come back at some point in time in some way. So I think, the idea of mindfulness, I think now is getting a lot of attention, right? Because as you said, there's so much isolation that's going on, right? Physical isolation, physical distancing. But, with that, I mean, there's a lot of time, right, that people have on their hands. And, the one reason why mindfulness started to gain so much attention and so much exposure prior to all this in the United States is because that, when you look at it philosophically, it allows you to pause, right? It allows you to be present. And, one thing about our country and our society as a whole is that we're always looking for what's next, right? We're always moving quickly, right? We're it's hard right now for a lot of people to be still, right? They're used to being able to get in their car, go to their local restaurant, right? That they've always gone to, or having plans on the weekend where they're running around. Even though your weekend's supposed to be your respite time, right? And you're supposed to relax. But many of us put just as much into our weekend and have packed schedules as we do in our work week. And, we've almost been programmed to a point to feel that we always have to keep moving and have to keep going versus the opposite is, when do we decide and determine that we don't need to do that, right? When can we pause? We don't have to always be doing something. And I think that's one thing that I think the mindfulness is so important. And especially for those of us right now, that are in education, because, this has caused us all to stop, right? But the idea is now what do we do? Humans are social emotional beings, right? So there's pieces that we need to know about ourselves so we can begin to adapt to what's going on, in our world today, right? Because it changes every day. It changes every week. It can change every hour.
Right.
And we have to know ourselves so that we can respond, not react, but we can respond to what's going on in a healthy, sustainable way.
Yeah. And, and I think it's that people are, wondering, okay, what's today? What is tomorrow? What is next week? What is to come? And if we look back to with our students with autism, we're pros at putting schedules together. I mean, for any of our kids, because people do need schedules.
Right.
And I think that, right now we're seeing a lot of stress in households with parents with significant disabilities because, it's quite difficult to provide evidence-based practices in the home environment because there is a lack of evidence-based practices of a parent being the practitioner. Really, the only evidence out there that we have is video modeling, which we know that video modeling, it can really be successful for any environment. And so I've always, now with all this happening, I've had the thought of, preparing now parents for this, where we would, for those specific students, help them develop a manipulative schedule, where that they can go manipulate about their day so they know what is coming next and what's coming after that. And the parent as well. So, we know that those two types of modalities are successful. And what I think right now is, and we're in need of a holistic leadership, and more of that servant leadership that we're not really. I'm not big in the political realm right now, but we're not really seeing that servant leadership. Because when we think about servant leadership, I mean, think about you, and we think about MLK, we think about Gandhi, and that they were with the problem, and that I feel that we're not all, as a community in our smaller individual bubbles in our schools and all that, we're with it, but holistically, I think we're not. And that's why we're seeing the foundations leave out of those really important sectors, and that's our children. So, I think in respects to keeping it simple, like what would you have to say? Oh, sorry. I thought you were cutting in there.
Well, I think, first and foremost is that, so first and foremost, I would say that in terms of simplicity, right? That's what we should always think about. We don't want to do more than what people are able to handle, right? So some basic practices, a couple of things in terms of, right, students, routines, and schedules, etc. Even though parents aren't the practitioners, right? However, the parents have known their child since the time that they were born, and they spend a lot of time with them. So there are simple things, right? In terms of, this is where true parent, school, family engagement partnership comes into play. Because if you think about it, provide a schedule and that works for their child at home, right? Regardless if they have, a child has an IEP or disability or not, right? Because as if you're a parent, that your child needs some type of structure. So with the students that have IEPs or have a specific disability, right? Especially during this time, the schedule doesn't have to be hectic, but it just has to be consistent, right? Knowing your child to know that, okay, my child's going to need breaks at some point in time, right? They're going to need time for transition. They're going to need time where they're not on the computer, right? And the screen time is limited, right? They're going to need time where they can just go outside. Like, we're physical distancing, but doesn't mean you can't go outside your home, right? Students should still be getting, physical activity, right? Important. So those pieces in the day, right, are important. But also, what does the day look like, right? When we're at home and we're doing this, pandemic learning, because I use that because until we have time to plan for remote learning, it's not
Yeah.
remote learning, right? This has
Yep.
all been,
Well said.
because of a crisis. So no one had a plan about how to do this, right? So, what we're doing now is not distance learning. It's not remote learning. It's not homeschooling. What this is crisis learning and crisis instruction. However, right, looking to the future, like we don't know what the future is going to hold, but, my educated guess, and this is just Evan speaking, not Evan representing his school district or any other organization, is that whatever it is, when we go back to physical, in-person learning, it's going to look a lot different than it was before, right? And it's going to take a new skill set to help students, right? Because what we also need to remember is that there's a transition that needs to take place, right? Because now we're talking about almost like a reentry, because we had this disruption. It was abrupt, right? Oh, okay. Some students were on spring break and then never came back, right? Some students, had a spring break and were back in school for a few days, and next thing you know, you can't come back to school. So that was abrupt. That wasn't planned. So now our students are in a mode, and our families are in a mode of this new learning style, right? But what is it going to look like next? How do we begin to plan for what that new school day looks like, what that new school calendar looks like, what that school year looks like? Because, there are going to have to be some type of new protocols in place for health and safety, right? Which means that takes time out of the instructional day, right? So how does that look like? How does that work? But also now, what are the type of skills in the skill set that's needed by educators, by leaders, and also what skills are our students going to need moving forward, right? Because I truly believe this has provided an opportunity in which we can look at more project-based learning, right? We can look at more cooperative learning. We can begin to use technology for the tool that it is to help facilitate education. Teachers can now be facilitators of the learning process, not just providing instruction, right? Students have had access to information anyway on the internet. So if you give them 5 questions, they can find the facts. It's not a problem.
Right.
But this new skill is helping them to figure out the data behind it, right? How to then formulate other questions, right, that are higher order thinking, right? How do they begin to use those skills to navigate their school community, right? That's what this is doing. And this is a great time because this is in real time, right? How many students can say that they had an opportunity to learn during a global pandemic, right? How many educators can say that? And then what do we do through that? So I think the whole piece about keeping it simple is that exactly it. What works? What's been working, right?
Right.
If it didn't work before, don't try to bring it back just because we may physically be together. Let's look at what's working right now and build upon that, right? Let's build upon it. I mean, you probably are very familiar, just as I am. Think about all the educators who maybe wouldn't consider themselves tech savvy, right?
Yeah.
Or technology, proficient. But now out of necessity, now everyone has to have a higher level of proficiency in their technology skills, or you can't survive, right? Let alone like thrive. You can't survive without that. So now when we talk about basics, right? And we talk about growth mindset, right? Truly, this is it, in its most organic, purest form. Because if I'm an educator, right, maybe I knew what wasn't working before, and I just kind of, maybe I said, I don't really believe in this, it's not working, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? But now think about it. We have a blank canvas.
Yeah.
We have a blank canvas, and we can start simple with just some core foundational thing. It doesn't have to be extravagant, right? What has worked in the past? Okay, great. What's currently working now, and let's build upon it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't more wholeheartedly agree with you. And the simple fact too that this blank canvas that we have and the opportunity, um, because again, we know that we're all not the perfect, we're all brand new to this, and I hate actually saying that, I really do, because it's getting old. It is absolutely getting old. But I think that with this blank canvas, we build our new systems here, because we're going to have to be teaching. We might be doing this again, as you've been saying, and so if we have a framework surrounded by SEL, and we're not calling it the new quarantine curriculum or anything like that, or like, I don't want this to be as a result of COVID. I want this to be something that a result of, this is the last time we're getting fooled, okay, because we've been fooled so many other times before that. And so when we built that SEL foundation in schools, I would love to see the world in 50 years from now. And how are people interacting with each other? Are they accepting? Are they present? Are they intentful also? And are they listening? And I think our view is so skewed on who people really are. And I'm going to get so cliche, but because of the internet and the demons and the monsters that we see that are on the YouTube comments and all of that, and I don't think that's the truth in people, and that's what we're getting perceived with. And this is me having so much faith in humanity and knowing that we can do something like this, and that, like you said, starting from the ground up. We don't have to get rid of math. We're not getting rid of reading. We're not getting rid of sciences or anything like that. No, we just like right. A PBIS, positive behavior intervention support system, we would want to incorporate this SEL system, where now we are getting more trauma informed across schools, which is so important, and understanding, our kids' A scores and relating to that. I think that's the most important part, was when we're in these PD sessions with these, people talking about mindfulness and talking about A scores, from our social workers, we have to relate. And if you don't, somebody that can, and like pulling that out of your heart and putting it into your mind and knowing how to connect with somebody. And, the pandemic and people not being able to get out their genuine expressions, having awkward conversations like over online, on your video chats and all that stuff, because of that delay, like it adds a whole new component into conversations, and some people can't handle that because it's awkward. And so where I'm going at it is that not just the framework for the administrators, teachers, and students, but also it has to be a cross-environmental curriculum, because again, our kids who are low functioning to the highest functioning student, or to our highest achieving student in the school, we all have requirements. And right now we are trying to say, I would love to push into your home, but I can't, and I have some other way, but I just can't grasp it. I don't know what it is, but there is some other way out there. And that's not in our hands yet. And it won't be until we sit down at that blank canvas and understand that we are not just a school, but we are community.
Yeah, definitely so. Definitely so. I think what you said, I totally agree with you, Michael. We have a great opportunity, right? However, we also have to make sure that that opportunity that we have, it truly involves all stakeholders, right? And I say that because for me as administrator, central office level administrator, if I don't understand what support resources that I provide to building level administration, which then allow those to be available for teachers, right? And then other resources that we provide to our families and community. If we don't all understand that we're not all working together, right, it's not going to work. And it's the same thing with SEL, right? Okay. And it truly is something that we just do. Okay. There's every time that we are interacting with a child, a student, a colleague, right? A family, person's family, a parent, caregiver. Those are all opportunities to embed social emotional learning, right? And the key with it is that, philosophically, I always believe that SEL works this way. It's always a three-pronged approach, right? It's always about SEL for students, which is what we see with the MTSS framework, PBIS or RTI, right? But then it's also SEL for families and communities, right? Because we all know there's certain things that we can provide to all of our families, but there are specific families that have specific needs, and we have to meet those needs of those families. And finally, always SEL for the adults in our building, right? Because we also need to think about them, right? Especially during times like this. We can't forget about the educators, because they need that as much as the students do, meaning understanding their own SEL and their wellness and their well-being. Because if that's not taken care of, right, they're the ones that are delivering instruction to students, and then it's not going to work. So
dude,
finding that's true.
You made the most keen observation, I believe it was through the all up there, and you said that on our very first Zoom call with the teachers, happy, peppy, and like all of a sudden, like either no like the data, and their faces are
yes.
Like,
yes,
I would love to see the data on that versus like how many people had their cameras on the first day.
Yes.
How many people have them on the last day?
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't know that was happening until like you said it, and I'm like, oh my god, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's true, and I think I think that's what when I recognize that, along with my team members, superintendent, director of curriculum instruction, building principal, that's when I knew we had to do something. And that's, I was able to then partner with Kavita Tana, who's also with Inspire Citizens, and then start providing this social emotional wellness for educators 3 times a week.
But who's advocating for you guys?
Right.
Who's advocating for the administrators? Because
right. And that's it. Right. So because here, and I would say that we're very fortunate, because when we started all of this, right, it truly, and I mean all of this in terms of the COVID, 19 situation, we came together as true like leadership, meaning union, right, building admin, district admin, right, and said, look, we all need this, right? We all need this. We all need to be there together. And that's when it's like, okay, if we're going to do this, right, we are advocating for each other, because we all need it, right? It's not about, that the administrators are going to be superheroes and they're just going to take everything. It doesn't work that way, right? Or because then what happens is if the administrators are giving everything, right, eventually they're not going to have anything left to give, right? So all of it has to be collective. So in terms of advocating, we all have to see that we all need this. So in terms of the educators, that's everybody. So everyone participates in our tri-weekly, social emotional well-being that we have, because it's because everyone gets it. So when you think about like, true organic, professional learning communities, PLCs, right? Rank, title go out the window, right? And that's the way what we're doing. It's all about, professionals, and that we're colleagues. Doesn't matter what title I have or what's on my business card or, what's on my door. At this time,
You're
we're all
defining servant
professionals and
leadership.
colleagues,
I love it.
right? That's it. That's, that's what it's about. And so that's what we did. And that's what we do, because we all need it. And we have to lift each other up during this time, right? We can't,
because what
can't
else
think that like,
if you don't,
right. It's not going to work. So I think that's key. And this is when the rubber meets the road, right? This is when, like, all the philosophy and rhetoric, right? This is your chance to prove it, right? This is the chance to prove, like, okay, great. We have this mission statement, right, for our organization, right? We have a vision, right? Okay. Now it's crisis. So now let's see, right? Let's see. And this is when people are going to show up, and this is when you're going to see things happen organically, right? Just to go on a quick sidebar, there's been a lot of conversations around evaluation, right? Because the evaluation cycle, right, was right in the midst of when COVID hit, right? I
got observed for my fifth and final time, so we got. But I know there's someone waiting to get, there's that deadline,
right? That's right. So think about it though. If the educators, it doesn't matter if you're a superintendent, if you're an administrator, if you're a teacher, if you're a para, right? Whatever your role is, right? And it has to do with getting your evaluation done and being evaluated. Think about it. Right now, the work that we are doing organically during this crisis, think about just the sheer elements, right? As we look at, and the indicators, if we were to look at this from an evaluation perspective, I would definitely, fight for a hard argument to say that at minimum, everyone's proficient, right? Because just by doing what they're doing right now in this crisis, probably elevates them even more, because these are the things that we all want to see, right? If we were to look at every component of Danielson framework, right? All the things that we like to say, oh, this is proficient. This is exemplar, right? But we always say we can't capture it because it's a snapshot. It's one observation. Then we try to get, like informals to kind of catch. Think about this. Right now, just the sheer work of teachers doing what they're doing for kids and how they're adapting and being flexible and being creative during this time. Like, this is the type of thing that we all have wanted to see, which tells me that it's not about us trying to be robots. It's not about us trying to formalize things to a point where it becomes a checklist and it becomes, this is just compliance, right? This is organic, framework for evaluation and for leadership going on. And this is what we've all talked about we should see. Well, this is what's going on now.
Do you think somebody who might be like, on, let's just say we're a first year teacher and, evaluations have been, let's say they had 3 out of the 4 done. The 4th one was coming, but COVID happened. And, this evaluation is the deciding factor. Are administrators thinking about, the lens of, kind of putting people back at that proficient level? I mean, is that like a conversation that you've been hearing amongst, like other, not just your colleagues and such, but because then it could be a union issue. Okay, well then you didn't give me my 4th chance to observe. So is your vision skewed on whether to give me another contract or not?
Well, I think, once again, right, are we putting people before policy or policy before people during this time, right? So, that as a leader, as an organization, right? What is your true mission, right? And what is it about? Because that's the question. Because right now, I don't know what I would have done if I was a first year teacher.
Yeah.
If I were a first year teacher and this happened in my first year of teaching, I think about that, because I don't know how I would have handled it. I don't know what I would have done, but I can tell you this: any first year teacher
doesn't know a thing,
right? But any first year teacher right now that is doing their job and doing the best that they can and they have not given up on their students, right? When easily they could have been like, this is way too tough. I didn't know I was signing up for this, and who knew like this global pandemic was going to happen, and like my world's been upside down. But any first year teacher, I have to give them kudos. I have to, because just the sheer fact that they are sticking with it, right? And they're enduring, and they're right there with everyone, where they could have easily been like, I'm a first year teacher. I didn't sign up for this. It's too tough for me. But they're not doing that. They're special. And this is a special time where, people are going to rise to the occasion. So I think in terms of those conversations about evaluation, I think it's a parallel conversation around assessment, right? And about, high stakes state assessments, right? All these things, all these notions that we had and the narrative that we had in terms of the compliance pieces of our profession, right? Now they're all being challenged, because it was always the what if, well, you can't do that, or if we do that, this is going to happen. But now look, right? There's a global crisis happened, and everything that we thought we could control or try to control, we couldn't. And as of right now, right, students are still having access to their teachers, right? Educators are still being creative during this time, right? People are finding ways to thrive during this crisis that they probably wouldn't have done, or we wouldn't have had the amount of people in the majority of educators doing that work, right? This has forced people to definitely look at their profession differently and to feel comfortable about it. And now really there's no rubric right now to measure what we're supposed to be doing.
Not at all.
Right? So think about in terms of having autonomy, right? No one's going to say, that you're not doing it the right way.
Right.
There is no right way.
No.
There is no right way. We're all trying to figure it out. So therefore, this is a great opportunity, a great learning opportunity for everyone.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, I do think about that, the first year teacher, and, you do have a lot of experience under your belt with those 3 quarters, like the 3 quarters of the year that you taught. And again, like as a 5th year teacher, I still know nothing. But, I look back to my first year and I'm like, oh my God, you little child, like, and it's like, I appreciate that, and so where my question's going at right now is, and I'm kind of just pulling this out of the air. We think about the things that we've lost and that we may lose from this, and that may take time to regain, or maybe it's going to take time to regain. It goes off on a different path. So I want to take this into like the early childhood setting. All right, the scenario here. So 2 scenarios: we come back with masks, or we do not come back with masks on. So for each of those scenarios, so let's start off with come back with mask on. How do you think that when you walk down that hallway, when you start your day at 7:30 and kids are running down the hall, how different is it going to feel? And what do you think the behavior would look like if we came back with masks on? From a social emotional lens, I haven't seen my friend in this long, but I got this mask on and now I kind of feel like I have to, kind of like in that aspect.
Well, I think that obviously children, especially the younger they are, they adapt a lot more quickly than the adults, right?
Right.
So for them, especially, right? We were talking about routines earlier, right? In the household and family. Now wearing a mask, right? Even 6 weeks ago was like, oh my gosh, right? It was like a
Yeah.
big deal. But now, right now, like now masks have become so much of the way that we are doing business because we have to, function, and it's part of the way that we're living. Now they're accessories, right? People have said, okay, if this is what we're going to do, right? I'm going to be
Put the
able
bowls on my
to,
mouth now.
right,
Put the
right. I
bears.
mean, right. I mean, it's so I think that from that perspective, I don't think there'll be as much from the children saying, oh, it's just like, oh, okay, nice to see you again. But now that this is just the way that like everyone else in my house wears masks. I'm where I go, like it's pretty much commonplace to only see someone from their eyes up now in public. And obviously when you're in your home, it's different, right? You're not wearing a mask all the time. But I think that perspective I think young people coming back, especially the little ones coming back with masks, I don't think there'll be any social emotional ramifications or negative way from that.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I agree with you. And I didn't even think about that, kind of like the accessory component to it. I mean, kids love to be flashy. They love to have, different emblems wherever. And then I think about the academic sense. I'm in complete agreement with social emotional. I mean, I kind of neglect to think, since I'm always with high schoolers, that like, their brains are still developing, but they're kind of like getting set and stuff like that. Or you're right, kids do adapt. Academically speaking, like I had to read lips, 'cause I have a hearing impairment, and and again, and I was never identified by an IEP or 504, for any of that. I mean, I was tested every year. And quite honestly, I failed every year, and it wasn't until college, and I couldn't. I'm like, gosh, I'm for one falling asleep because I can't hear, and so I go get I go get tested, and I get them, and so I just remember, how beneficial that was. Where am I going with this? And so just that aspect of being able to read communication. I think that when we talk about the positives of the social emotional, I also do think that it's going to be like a downgrade of the internet, like where like you don't know what someone is really intending because you can't see what they're saying.
Yes.
And I'm usually not the Debbie Downer here, but wow.
No, I mean, it's the same thing with communication, virtual communication right now, right? We lose a lot of the interaction that we get in person, right? And as much as it's great to see someone's face, right, you still don't get the same interaction in terms of body language and just the synergy of the conversation, right? And in this mode, it takes so much energy to focus, right, and to be engaged, which is why, like, you start seeing this whole thought of like, fatigue from virtual meetings, right? It's screen time, and you're trying to figure out context. You're trying to be able to understand, okay, is that like, where is this coming from? Like, where's the context? Like, is it literal, or that, all these other things that typically in person we can figure out, but it's through a screen. I think the challenge that you said is true, is very, very real. So I think this is, once again, right, how do we become creative in terms of the mode that we communicate in? This goes back to learning styles, right? So if we've always been communicating, right, verbally, right, okay, well, what if I'm not an auditory learner, right? Okay, so like, what if, okay, so now truly thinking about how do I now, like what we've all been taught we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to know our students in the style of learning that our students utilize best and they're comfortable with, and that, that they can be most successful at. But how often, truly, how often do we do that? And that's just a reflective question, because like you said, if my mouth is covered, right, all of a sudden it looks right, me trying to figure out what you may be saying, right, is going to be tough. It's going to be difficult. So now, do we also use different modes of communication? Do we start making sure there's visual representation? Yeah. Are we truly going to use the technology that we have all been blessed with and fortunate enough to have, right? That is been on the wall for I don't know how long, right? And are we truly going to utilize now all the features that we have, right, to make sure that every student in that classroom, right, is getting what they need? And that's an equity issue. It truly is, right? It's an equity issue.
Absolutely.
Right? So when you talk about an inclusive learning environment, is it truly inclusive? Are we going to be able to find ways to do things? Look, if there are students that need to have like a brain break, right? How often do teachers build in brain breaks for all of their students? Right? Or do they think, oh, this student with this that has this accommodation needs a brain break? Well, wouldn't that work for every student?
Right.
Like, don't
Right.
what you know what I'm saying? So there are certain things that I think as we go back to as we talked about earlier, what are the minimal things we can do? What are the basic things we can do? What are things that are not hard to go back to that we can implement, utilizing the resources that we have right now, and how do we begin to do that and say, wow, am I truly being inclusive? Am I being inclusive as a teacher? Am I being inclusive as a leader, and making sure that we're having those conversations, we're having those discussions, and we're always talking about all of our students? Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to now begin to widen the access and opportunity gap as we begin to start a new school year, right? We want to be thinking about every student, every child, every family, and reduce the likelihood that there may be potential inequity issues, or students aren't being included into what we're doing for learning.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an equity issue, and and it's again like, how can, and as you reiterated that we have this blank canvas and that this time is perfect because it kind of is like a reset. And so I think that it's just like taking the approaches that you're talking about. How do we get each stakeholder to, come to a commonality, throw these titles out the window, throw that Johnny needs a break, but Jimmy doesn't, but, Sarah is identified with one, so she has to get it, hey, that's just it. How do we get people to understand that that's just what they need? Just like how, right. You may need a big hug right when you get home, but the kid next to you doesn't. That's just a terrible example.
Right.
So,
but no, right.
Rather than let's look at the needs of our emotion. What do we need emotionally? Right. and how do we foster that? And so, when we talk about how, you seem chip, you seem cheery, and obviously you are a really good practitioner of mindfulness, but I want to know a little bit more inside, like, and even when you talked about getting grounded, getting center, you came out of a hectic meeting today, not a hectic, but I mean, just long meetings. Mm-hmm. And again, it's that fatigue and like, right. And then you're like, God, I got to go on with this kid on his podcast later, but like, it's that you're like, on to the next thing, but you have a different attitude here. And so how do you start your mindfulness for the day? How do you say, I'm right. here? What's your approach?
Right. Believe it or not, it's pretty simple. I talk a lot about my 3 B's: balance, boundaries, and breaks. And, for me, my 3 B's are rooted in mindfulness and also dialectical behavioral therapy. And for me,
Can you talk what
sure.
style Let's Go behavioral therapy?
Sure. So, for those of you that are familiar with different types of behavioral therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy, right? It's an offshoot of that, but really, dialectical behavioral therapy works on individuals understanding their place in life, and really that you know things aren't necessarily, or opportunities or instances aren't necessarily good or bad, right?
Right.
It all from a perspective how we look at it. And therefore there's always a middle path, right? So a person can make a bad decision, but that doesn't make them a bad person, right? And a person can make a great decision, right? Doesn't mean they're a great person. It's just the actions that they have done in that particular time and space represent that. And it really looks at, you can't have extremes, right?
Right.
So that's really kind of the quick version of a dialectical behavioral
Yeah.
therapy.
Thank you.
So for me, my mindfulness is very simple, right? So it actually starts the night before, right? Making sure that I'm getting enough sleep and I'm going to sleep at the right time, right? Because also you have to make sure your brain is turned off, because even if you're laying in the bed, it doesn't mean anything, right? So when I wake up, first thing I do is I meditate, and I don't meditate for long, no more than 10 minutes. It's just quick, brief. And the thing about meditation is it's not what people think. It's not what you would see on TV or in a movie, whatever. It's very, very simple. Very simple. Just sitting in a comfortable place and just focusing on your breathing, right? Breathing in and breathing out. Inhale, exhale. Just focusing on that. And it's not about how long you do it for. It's just about doing it and starting it, right?
Yeah.
So if you can only meditate for a minute, okay, great. That's a minute. But that's a minute that you allowed yourself to start your day in the right state of mind. And even when you're meditating, like, it takes time before you're going to hear things, your mind's going to wander a little bit and it'll come back, but it's a starting point, and for me, that's how I get my day started. That helps me. And believe it or not, those 10 minutes can carry me through the entire day.
Yeah.
Right? Because instead of me waking up and, trying to, do a million other things, right? Then all of a sudden I'm running, right?
Where are you
And
doing
I'm
this
moving
at?
quickly.
Where did you say you meditate at?
So I can go anywhere. Like,
Anywhere.
I'll go downstairs, well, anywhere, as long as it's a place enough where I can get some quiet time, right? And be able to do that. And because it starts my day in a point where I'm not bringing anything from the day before, right, into this day. And I'm not rushing through other things, like, before my day even starts. Because if I have a meeting at 9:00, right, what I don't want to do, I don't want to wake up at 8:45, right, and 8:30 and just try to jump into a meeting, which many of us, like, do. I mean, I do it at times, where like, I don't have as much space and transition between as I want to. It happens, but to be to a point where you don't want to do that, because once your day starts off, you can never catch up, right? You can never catch up, and you're always trying to do that. So just when you can practice mindfulness, it allows you to do that. It allows you to pause. It allows you just to be present. And you can do that during the day, right? You can do it for 2 minutes. Like, after, hey, if you had a hectic meeting, right? Take 2 minutes out of your time, right? To take care of yourself, right? And your self-care, because that 2 minutes could carry you over for the next hour that you may have a meeting. Versus you're gonna try to go from a meeting that was long, right? Some of these, Zoom meetings can, or virtual meetings can go for an hour and a half, right? And then if you don't build in time for yourself, right, to pause, to center, before you go into another meeting, before you know it, like it's been a marathon of meetings and you've never taken time out for yourself just to pause, just to breathe, right? And that is something that you'll never be able to catch up with, and your mind will always be running, and your body will always be running. You
Well,
have to give yourself time and permission to do so.
The meditation, it's very effective. And again, it's just like mindfulness, you have to practice it. And, but I do think that the people's biggest struggle is, okay, breath in, breath out. I got to take the chicken out of the freezer, and then, okay, hey, come on. All right, get back, breath. Okay. And it's like, it's crazy how much more inside your mind you can get, but that's how you kind of know you're doing it right, in a sense,
Yes.
because you're recognizing that it's there, and now you're trying to say, okay, let's get my attention back. And
Yes.
I would be a fantastic piano player if I played every single day, and you could be a fantastic mindfulness practitioner and meditator, if you can do that. And I kind of really wanted to share this quote at the beginning, but we did our thing. And it's Jimmy V, legendary head coach at NC State. And I love his quote: "If you laugh, you think, and you cry, that's a full day. That's a heck of a day. You do that 7 days a week, you're going to have something special." And I really do think that crying is, it is important, whether you have your happy tears, your sad tears, or it doesn't have to be, it has to be some sort of sympathetic feeling, that's how I take my interpretation of it, or empathy or sympathy, some sort of way where you're trying to relate to somebody. And, and this could be exemplified just like through watching I love the show Schitt's Creek, man. Highly suggest to check it out. It's just so goofy and funny, but it's just like The Office, where like they bring in this really sentimental part of it that you don't expect out of nowhere. I was just cracking up, and then now, like, man, like this is putting me in a good place, and so by feeling those things and those ranges of emotions, our emotions are a roller coaster, and you want to be able to, get up and have enough height to finish, at the end and say, I want to ride that again. But if you don't want to ride that again, we look at it like in Zen of the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, you need to do maintenance on your own machine.
Yes.
And so let's not change the ride. We're not going to go to a different ride because this is your ride. So, we're going to get enough leverage up here at the top. Now we just need to figure out, we just need to get those peaks a little bit lower, or let's not, have such an exhilaration here. So then where we, have to shoot right back up into another emotion. So like, I think that if we can take our emotions, understand where they're coming from, express them with somebody, and also in your meditation, coming to peace with that. I've recognized that as something that has really benefited me in times when I'm feeling burnout. And that's when I know I'm not practicing,
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you talked about. So you talked about your meditation and just taking your breaks, your time to sit, reflect, and understand, to transition, like you put it today. I love it. Is there anything else that you can sprinkle on? That's two big key components here. Like, can we get like a big three? Like your 3 B's here. What would be maybe my third one?
Sure. Well, as I said, like that's one of the reasons why I do have my 3 B's. So that the first one is balance, right? And that is balancing your time, energy, and efforts into people, projects, and relationships that are going to be reciprocal, right? And that can be applicable to family, right? It can be applicable to if you're a spouse or significant other. It can be applicable to if you have children, right? Colleagues. Oftentimes, Everyone's, we talk a lot about, oh, I can't balance, I can't balance. Well, you can balance, right? You can balance. You can make a conscious decision about what is worth and what is it in terms of value. Is it worth me putting my energy and efforts into something that's not going to be reciprocal, right? And then how much do you give, right? The second one is the boundaries, right? And it goes along with the balance, because the boundaries is not just about other people's boundaries, but it's about yours. It's about your ability to say no. You can't be everything for everybody.
Right.
It's impossible. And especially in our field, right? As educators, we're givers. We're givers by nature, but oftentimes we don't advocate for ourselves in terms of what we need, right? And I talk about this a lot, is that, the narrative for a long time in education, is parallel to like martyrdom, right? If I give this, I'm the martyr. Look what I did. Look what I did. Look at the hours I put in today. Look what I gave to everyone. This is what I did for my students. I gave to my parents, right? This is what I did for my school. Well, there's many of us that also have our own families, have our own children, right? And are we conscious about that and thinking about, okay, sometimes we just have to say no. We have to give ourselves permission and advocate for ourselves and say, no, I can't do that, right? I won't do that, right? And then the last one is what I've been talking about a lot is the breaks, right? We have to pause. We have to give ourselves permission to do that. And this is all about, our own self-care and wellness. Because as we talk about SEL, we talk about SEL for adults, it's like the number one advocate for you has to be you.
Right.
It has to be you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, if it's your significant other or if it's, maybe someone else. You have to do that. You have to be the one that's willing to do so. And it has to be important to you, so that at the end of the day, right, you have enough to give to others.
Yeah.
You have enough to do that. And that's truly why, I have so much faith in my 3Bs. I talk about them as much as I can. I spread that message, because it doesn't matter if you're an educator, if you're a first responder, if you're an athlete, if you're a coach, if you're in the business world. I mean, it's applicable to everyone. It's like, because, we really have to, especially now in these times, right? We now have to work on the self-care for ourselves, because there's so much going on and you're being pulled in so many different ways, right? And now you're being pull in so many different ways simultaneously for your responsibilities. You have to take the time out and give yourself permission to work on yourself first, and put that that oxygen mask on before you put on someone else. Before you want to save someone else, yourself first, so then you can take care of the other person.
Oh, absolutely. And I think about it back to even now with the advancements in technology, and now that we have, Facebook and our how we comment and express emotions and such. We're limited to a thumbs up. Now we have a smiley face with a heart around it. Then we have an angry face, right? Those are our emotions that we're going to go ahead and we're going to identify with. And so now we've seen only a dispersal of emotions, either to online or into our family, because we're in isolation here. And I'm just going back, and I have to emphasize so much on why we need to push for this SEL as a systems base, is because when we move into, we're only going to get more technological. I mean, I was just looking online, and there's these tech startup companies that are just going bananas right now with AI. And so where I'm coming back with this is that when we start moving to that future direction where decisions are being made for us, we need to quickly grab this out of the air right now and grab our ownership of how we should be managing our emotions rather than letting things manage it for us. Because again, we used to have that teacher connection with student, and then now here comes COVID, and so now it's blocked, but I have to go through some, delayed online internet wires to get to you and hear your emotion, or same thing with a friend in your classroom. And then we get all back to normal, and maybe some of that's repaired, but that is the time to put preventative measures up, so that when we move into the future of AI, and I mean, dude, it's just insane what they're doing. I mean, they could take my, an exact image and, realistic video of me and say whatever the heck it wants to say. They are reporting cars are driving people off of cliffs, as murders, but people are hacking into it. So like, there's just so many crazy things that we're going to be coming up that we're not prepared for, just like this. This is just an example of what we're not prepared for. And I'm thinking very extreme here. Like, I am not a conspiracist or anything like that, but it's just what's going to happen. So your passion and your push, you're so active on Twitter here. And I want to actually, I'm going to put your handle. Your handle is going to be all over this, but at Evan Whitehead 00. You're so active on Twitter. You post so many positive things, and I'm not just saying that. Like, I'm genuinely uplifted reading your posts and how many people you're trying to share with, and that you're trying to connect with. Like,
thank you.
People need that, and you've done that even before this is happening. And so, what it shows is that your genuinity. I don't know if I said that correctly. Your authenticity, that's the better word, of an SEL, because people can go and say, I'm a mindfulness practitioner, I'm this and that. But dude, Becky, you just were telling me how, how stressed out you were, and and it's okay to be stressed, but it doesn't seem like you have things in order, from the outside perspective. So you are such a great practitioner of it. And how are you using efforts like this to push this out, to eventually talking to people from around the world? Like, I'm still blown away on how awesome that was.
Well, I think, I always try my best to be authentic, right? And in order to be authentic, you have to be vulnerable. And, whatever I say or do, I own it, right? I own it. And, I just been blessed that people, things that I say have resonated with people, and it reaches people from places I would have never imagined, because I'm just speaking my truth. I'm speaking what I know, what I'm passionate in. And I don't claim to be an expert. I don't claim to know everything, but I do have my own experiences, professional, personal, and I listen. I listen to other people. I'm open to do that. That's the other part. I'm always willing to learn. And I know it's a cliche in our field about being a lifelong learner, and a lot of people say that, but I truly mean that. I mean, every day I'm fortunate enough to learn something new from someone, right? And I think that at its core, that's a huge piece of social emotional like learning, right? And being and having those skills, right? Because you have to be at a place where you're open to learn something new, right? So yeah, it's great. I'm glad, things that I'm saying are resonated with people, but they also have to be ready, for that. And I think that's, as we talked about everything, tonight, it's true. Like, you could have the best idea in the world, Michael, phenomenal, right? But if you bring it to me and I'm your building or district administrator, right? And I'm not in a place where I want to hear what you have to say, or it's not articulated to me in the way that it needs to be, it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. So I think that's where we have to go back to the point of, as humans, we are social emotional beings, right? We have to understand people. We have to understand the why behind something. It's not just necessarily the what, but the why. We have to understand everyone has a story. Everyone has, a reason why they are what they are. We all have experiences, and we have to get to a point. We must get to a point where we are open, willing, honest to say, and vulnerable to do that, because that's when the true learning happens. Right now, it's a crisis. So what happened? All of a sudden, so many people have let their guard down. Why? Because it's going back to the basics, the layers and barriers that we may have put in front of us before. They don't matter now, because that's not what we're trying to do. So I think we're in a great position now where this is a great learning opportunity. And I just hope that, that we do that. And for me, another big piece that I try to do is that, I understand that systemically in our profession, my colleagues that are in central office, district administration, we have a certain responsibility, and we make decisions. So my job is always this, is that I'm a teacher at heart. I'm always going to be a teacher. Just depends on who I'm teaching.
Right.
I started as a crisis interventionist and a paraprofessional in a therapeutic day school. Wow. So I've done almost every role in a school district.
Yeah.
I've been a building administrator. I taught self-contained EDB high school. I understand so many roles within education. So I feel it's my responsibility to be able to articulate those pieces to the different stakeholders and connect the dots so that things can happen and that need to happen. Because if there's a disconnect, on whatever part, it's going to disrupt what we're trying to do, and it's going to disrupt what our mission is, and that's, we're supposed to be doing this about the children. That's supposed to be our priority.
Do you have any experience in restorative practices?
Not formally. In terms, I would never consider myself, I'm not a trainer
or practitioner or whatever. Yeah.
Right. No, but restorative practices, once again, are basically built on SEL, understanding, what's this other person's experience,
cause and
what's
effect
my experience, That's it. It's basic, and so now, yes, it has a name attached to it, but if you think about it, it's a way in which there was a lot of early conflict resolution, around that, and how to do it in a peaceful manner. But it's all about, how can you begin to have empathy, It's all about that, understanding someone else's experience and the why behind it. So I think that, restorative practices are great, and but once again, it can't be something that's an add-on. Right. It has to be integrated into the way that our education process happens. So I think that, like anything else, a training is great. A PBS is great. Whatever it is. But if it just becomes another added on responsibility that's not integrated, it's going to be very hard to implement.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate. And where I think that the mitigation and the solution, and not the solution, it's just a potential solution, is that, you go forward with looking at how do we look at a normal school day and make it a system-based SEL day where a period or two we're off in the community. And, and not my, I'm saying all the population, and it's just community improvement. And I know that can get creative. And we look at, transportation and picking up our kids and from the school and taking them to whatever site we need to do to develop those skills. That could be one part, community based there. And then, am I saying this would be an additional class onto there, because I don't think we're at the point of where we can fully integrate it into, I know that people can interject these into their curriculums. I'm not saying that we don't have the intelligence or the possibility to do that. I think that I don't think people have enough to wrap their minds around that. So do we just interject it into as a a tri-weekly type of class where we're out in that community. And I know there's some sort of, programs like that, especially for freshmen, that they just have a period to get purely acclimated with the school and get their volunteer activities.
Right.
And then they have their freshman lead, or their senior leaders come in and talk to them and stuff like that. I'm saying way outside of that. I'm saying that where we are fully trained, coming back to the beginning of our conversation, that we are fully trained to implement this, with including, those add-ons into there, but again, infused and soldered in a way that it works. But once you bring change on people, that's really hard to do. I don't know, like, I'm just talking out loud because to gather some sort of idea, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is as we talk about how are we facilitating education versus just providing instruction, right? Those are the pieces I think that can happen. Sometimes we get more caught up in the logistics when we're at the brainstorming phase, right?
Right.
Because if
really
everyone
accurate,
gets involved in on the brainstorming phase where it's truly brainstorming, right? If the idea is presented and articulated, that we have collective buy-in, then you go to the logistics phase. But you don't want to stop a beautiful potential of an opportunity because it's being slowed down with the logistics right away, right? Because we don't even give it a chance if that's the case. So I think there are things that we could do in that nature. I think obviously at the secondary level, it provides great opportunities for that because now you can build it in, to part of the schedule or the day, or create it as an elective, or you can just have so much flexibility because now, you can specialize in things, right? And I think at the elementary level, I think there's always an opportunity to start that conversation and do it in smaller bites, right?
Right.
There's ways to do that. There's ways to begin to build that in so that it is just part of the way that we do business in terms of instruction. So my hope is that this experience will begin the conversation and almost an entry point so that we can start looking at what our curriculum looks like and how we can build this into our education system for all of our students.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to kind of cap us here with two kind of posing situations. So, first I want to kind of talk about compassion fatigue. And, you and I both being in your where you taught at Priory, you have experience into self-contained. Gosh, I mean, just anywhere in your life, I think that we have such high emotional IQs, especially me. I think it's my, biggest weakness, my biggest strength, is my compassion and my passion. And so, but then there's times when you have those days or weeks, which I've been through, and and this week was a little tough too, and that you feel so bad all the time for a parent or the parents, especially during this time, because we know our kids can be very tough to manage at home, and especially when parents are, being parents, they were never. They are teachers, but they're not that school teacher. And I just can't imagine, they're having a double summer when they really depend on this to structure their child and such. I can't explain the feeling that I have, and I always catch myself, and I'm saying I understand. I'm actually no, I don't, but I'm trying my best to. And when we talk about compassion fatigue, even when you're practicing mindfulness, are you still getting that compassion fatigue?
You know, I would say it has decreased a lot. You know,
Okay.
early.
Now, okay, so because, let's say your special ed placement, which a lot of compassion is coming and stuff like that, because you got, and I don't know what you're doing, your daily operations with the parents, but I mean, you have the students, you have the
Mhm.
fatigue that they give you, then the parents that they give you. Is that a factor into why, or has you just gotten better at practicing mindfulness?
I've gotten better. I've gotten
Okay.
better. And because I think that, as I stated earlier, in general, educators are givers, right? And so therefore, you're at risk of compassion fatigue, right? And what that means, because you give so much, you get so connected. However, that goes back to the other piece, as I was talking about my 3 Bs, is the boundaries, right? Because you have to give yourself permission to say no, and give yourself permission to take some time away and step away and not be so involved, and understanding that there are some things that you can't fix, you can't control, right? That's part of it. Even though if you're putting 100% in, right, there are some things you can't. And because if you don't do that, right, you'll be drained. You won't have anything left. So it's, and especially in our field of special education, right, it's always high needs students, right? Families that have a lot of needs, and it's just because daily that's what their life is about. So for us, we really need to be very cognizant of that, because there is a lot of burnout, in our particular area of education. There's a lot of turnover, right?
Right.
Because we all know that that's part of it, right? We're giving so much of ourselves, but we're not balancing that out. So because of that, there's a lot that goes into it. So I think, there were times in my career where definitely I did not have the balance in place. There were definitely times where I was just, it was like, it happens, it's real, and compassion fatigue is real. We see it, especially, first responders, and we see it, those that are in social work, and, because you're giving so much of yourself, it's going to happen. But we have to always work to be mindful about that, because we don't want ourselves to be in a situation where we're burned out and we can't continue. Then we're no good for anyone, right?
Right.
We're no good for our families,
Right.
when we're no good for our students and families that we serve either.
Yeah. And actually, just um, uh, how long have you been in the role of administrator right now?
So I've been in my current district for 5 years, but I've been a central office administrator going on this my 11 years, and then I was in building administration for about 4 years too.
So, it's not often that we do have, or, out of my two school history, that I have um, someone, obviously outside my DL, my division leader, that is special education oriented or has a special education background. Obviously, my biased opinion knows that you bring so much benefit to your role, having that background, and that your sped community benefits, from that, and because of your advocacy. But what do you bring now to the table? What have you brought to the table with your special ed background that kind of has made people go, okay, think about thinking in a different way?
Right. Well, I think the one thing is that anytime I'm working with my leadership team, my district, or working with other leaders, right? Whether they're, whatever their role may be in central office in their own district or organization, is that, I'm always advocating and thinking about the students that I dedicated my career to and those families from the beginning. So I'm always going to be looking at everything through a special educator lens, right? I'm always looking at things from an inclusive lens. I'm always going to ask the questions through an inclusive lens. So for me, I feel very blessed, but I also think it's my responsibility to do that, because if I'm the only one in the room, who else is going to be the advocate for those families and for those students? I have to do that. I have to raise those questions, because a lot of times it's just if others don't know, they just don't know, right? And there's no malintent behind it. But once again, if that focus is not even part of the conversation, right, there could be a lot of damage done unintentionally, just because you're not thinking about that piece, right? And we don't want our students to be lost in the shuffle. We don't want them to fall between the cracks, right? That's not what we want. So I think my job and my duty, and my advocacy, is to always speak from that perspective and look at things with that optic, and always, remind those about, students with special needs, students that come from, underprivileged backgrounds, students that, have had other challenges that are not quote unquote, typical student. The reality is that my job is to do that and to make sure that I can reduce the likelihood of inequities for students.
Absolutely. That's honestly, it's just amazing to hear, man. And this community, I mean, I'm just inspired by that, and that mindset that you have is just so important. So thank you for that. I kind of want to wrap it up here.
Sure.
Just to, kind of ponder on the question of what is your ultimate destination? What is your destination? The life is our journey, and we learn from our experiences. And where do you want to get to?
You know what? I don't think I want to get to a certain place, but I share my message and to scale it.
Oh, hey, one second, man. Mike kind of blew there. There. All right, there we go. Now you're good.
I don't really want to get to a certain place, but I do want my message to be shared and to scale my message, right? So, where I am in my career right now, that's kind of what my mission is, right? And to be able to be an advocate and to speak on behalf of and for and be the voice for those students and families that I spoke about earlier. That's where I feel, where I'm at right now, what I love to do, because, just speaking with you and getting feedback that you provide me, it makes me feel as though I'm doing my job, right? I want to be able to give back. I want to be able to help out. I want to be able to mentor other people who are just getting into the profession, right? Because we always need people that are in the pipeline that are ready to do good work, that want to have a mission of servant leadership, right? And to be able to say, hey, I want to make a difference, and it's not about me, it's about we. So that's really where I am right now. And I've been fortunate enough to do that, fortunate enough to that people even want to give me some time to speak on on their show, like you and other folks that have had me on as a podcast guest, and continuing just very blessed that my school district and my superintendent, Dr. Janice Jackson, and our school board, is supportive of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And they believe in me, and that, allow me to continue to do that, and to, bring what I have and what I experience that I have into my district, but also allowing me to share what we're doing and the good work that we're doing with others.
Yeah, and I think the theme that you really are centralizing around is that there's a hierarchy system in place for a reason, and that's just because there just has to be some sort of process of moving up and down it. But when you look at a person, you're person to person, and I talk about this when I went to Machu Picchu last summer. We're in these catacombs, and I just look at all these skulls and these bones, and I just sit there and reflect, and I'm like, they're all the same. They're all the same. So like, it just brings me back to the idea of that when you just see these things that happen in society, you're like, that is just so silly. That's your brother over there, and silly is a lack for a better word there. It's just confusing. And the moment that we can get people to understand that, I think that it's maybe utopian in a sense, but we can see a positive outlook on life, and people wanting to go and take more risks and be more creative with their jobs. And I think that there's people that would be nervous to approach an administrator to say that I think that I can do this part here, but it's outside of my job description, and again, I have supportive administrators like you're saying, and it's amazing. Like, it just makes you feel validated in that they trust you and that they value you. And that's really cool. But I know it's not like that in many places where people would fear that. And so again, it's not being afraid of, Administrator Whitehead. It's communicating with Evan Whitehead, Mr. Whitehead, do you got anything that you want to plug or talk about, anything coming up or anything like that? You know what? You were just muted there. Okay. There you go.
No, I'm involved in several different projects. I'm working with a lot of good people. A lot of members of my PLN. And really, I just want to say, if anyone wants to reach out to me, anything I can do to support, help, conversation, give some guidance, please contact me on Twitter. I typically get back, to folks, and it's another piece that I remember, like, when I was, starting and getting on social media earlier, there were people that were willing to talk to me, so I always want to be able to do that as well. And yeah, I just glad to be on your show. Obviously, we didn't talk much about CEC and Illinois CEC, but quick story. So when I was in my undergrad, I was actually the president of our university chapter of our student CEC.
Where'd you go?
I was at Northeastern Illinois University.
Oh, nice, man.
Yeah. So from that, that was my first exposure to CEC, and obviously got a chance to go to the national convention, and once I graduated, I became a member of CEC, and I've always looked at CEC as a great opportunity because I learned so much early on as being a student president, but then just the networking with people that are in the field of special education, and seeing how diverse that we are in terms of our background experiences and what that means. I always try to stay connected, and definitely I love what they're doing, always have. And an organization like that's able to be advocates for students with IEPs and those individuals with disabilities in general, but then the fact that
they're the standard of special education.
Right, but right, hands down. And then the fact that they can also live very specific to needs within special education, because we know that our profession, our facet of education is very diverse as well. So yeah, that's just the last thing I want to say. And I'm always proud to support them, and anything I can do to continue to be a part of their work and their advocacy as well.
Yeah, right now we're in talks of our next virtual symposium that we're trying to develop here, and just because we're, it comes up in November, late October, and who knows when phase 5 will hit or anything like that.
Right.
So getting proactive with it. But yeah, the organization is flawless. They've let me, come on in and, as a member, and do podcasts there, and also be on the board. And the networking is out of this world. And again,
Yeah.
like I love experiences like this because, I am looking for mentorship, because this is how I'm learning. I learn best by talking to people. I learn best by talking it out. And also I'm just genuinely curious, like, and I see people doing cool stuff. And so that's why I love that organization, because you can just network out.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah. Again, Evan, I really do appreciate you having you on here. Once we get out of this, you'll be more than welcome to come on over to my house, and we'll do up another one or something like that. A little
Appreciate it.
Like that.
Thanks,
Man.
Michael. Appreciate it, man.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's great that we're relatively local, so
yes,
it's
sir.
great it's great to always be able to I love everybody I connect with, but anytime I can connect with someone that's from Illinois, Chicago area, I love it anymore, because now I know there's more of like-minded people that are close to me.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was our 10th episode here of Advocacy Prime with Evan Whitehead, the absolute man, and a great pusher and enthusiast here of SEL learning. So I hope that all of you have a wonderful day.